Hi, good morning and welcome to, or it might not be morning for you, I guess, but good whatever it is to you. And welcome to This Is Not Sunday School. This is episode 5, Why God Hates Cell Phones. It's a clickbait title like all of them have been and will be in the future. God doesn't hate cell phones, spoiler alert. I want to start out by talking about the history of the older generation hating on technology. It has a long, repetitive history. Got this little funny picture on my screen. For those that are listening, it shows a caveman painting a cart and horse. Excuse me. And the caveman, it looks like his partner saying, "When are you going to stop wasting your time with that science fiction nonsense and start dealing with reality?" There is a long, interesting pattern historically that whenever people have complained about youth, they include a complaint about technology in that complaint. And so, for instance, in Cicero, I don't know if that's how you say his name, but in 43 BC, he said, "Times are bad." This is a quote. Children no longer obey their parents, and everyone is writing a book. So there you go, that technology of writing a book, which back then was their modern technology. As cities grew, here's another interesting quote. This is jumping forward a long stretch in time, but we don't have time for everything. This is 1695. Robert Russell says, "I find by sad experience how the towns and streets are filled with lewd, wicked children. And many children, as they have played about the streets, have been heard to curse and swear." By the way, I'm going to do a episode on cursing and swearing one of these times. And going back to the quote, "and call one another nicknames." Oh, how dare they? And it would grieve one's heart to hear what bawdy and filthy communications proceeds from the mouths of such. So this is interesting. This is from a little book for children and youth. I think Robert Russell was a pastor, which is also interesting because there's always seems to be a religious subtext that accompanies these great statements of moral outrage. So as cities grew, imagine this whenever you think your children need to spend more time outside playing, how Robert felt about that. Couple of other ones. Science and psychology of the past, like it does today, openly and frequently made claims that youth were being destroyed, even by gaming technology of the time. We got a couple of quotes here. This one is from July 1859. Scientific America says, quote, "A pernicious excitement to learn and play chess has spread all over the country, and numerous clubs for practicing this game have been formed in cities and villages. Chess is a mere amusement of a very inferior character, which robs the mind of valuable time that might be devoted to nobler acquirements. While it affords no benefit whatever to the body, chess has acquired a high reputation as being a means to discipline the mind, but persons engaged in sedentary occupations should never practice this cheerless game. They require outdoor exercises, not this sort of mental gladiatorship." Again, July 1959 of Scientific America. So I think that goes to show a couple of things. By the way, recently there has been a renaissance of chess playing by the youth, which is kind of a nice side note. But it's interesting to see science sometimes agrees with these issues, and we'll go into cell phone and the current science in a second. But the next quote, this is 1790, so this was actually an earlier period, by Memoirs of the Bloomsgrove Family, Reverend Enos Hitchcock. I'm sorry, this guy was a reverend. The previous slide of I misspoke and said Robert Russell's little book for children and youth. He was a preacher. I don't think that was true. A pastor. I think I was thinking of this guy. Memoirs of the Bloomsgrove Family, Reverend Enos Hitchcock, he says. The free access which many young people have to romances, novels, and plays has poisoned the mind and corrupted the morals of many promising youth and prevented others from improving their minds and useful knowledge. Parents take care to feed their children with wholesome diet, and yet how unconcerned about the provision for the mind, whether they are furnished with solitary food or with trash, chaff, and poison. It would be interesting to interview him and see what plays he was talking about. Probably that Wicked Shakespeare. So yeah, jumping forward to today, I read this interesting commentary on, this is a study, commentary, an updated agenda for the study of digital media use and adolescent development, future directions following Odgers and Jensen, which was a study they did apparently. This was from that study, or a commentary on that study. The review offered by Odgers and Jensen 2020 thus offers an important and compelling turning point in literature by demonstrating that the length of time adolescents spend using digital media is not reliably associated with maladaptive outcomes. So let me repeat that right there. The length of time adolescents spend using digital media is not reliably associated with maladaptive outcomes, such as depression, anxiety, and risk behavior. As noted by Odgers and Jensen 2020, extant work remains plagued by several notable limitations. These include a paucity of longitudinal data and under-reliance on theoretical frameworks to guide this research area, and a rapidly evolving media landscape that alters the meaning and relevance of constructs under investigation even before data have been analyzed. I love that sentence right there. A rapidly evolving media landscape that alters the meaning and relevance of constructs under investigation even before data have been analyzed. That's a perfect description of the press, who immediately come out with whatever clickbaity headline they can to say how terrible digital media is and how it's destroying us. And this is the kind of thing that you've probably heard. But the truth is the studies can't keep up to the media claims something. It changes the landscape as parents, react. Usually adversely. Continuing on with the quote, indeed, investigators have examined other types of social interaction in similar ways for decades. However, within the digital context, it remains difficult to adequately operationalize behaviors before adolescents have moved on to a new app or begin to establish new norms for how to interact with it. Nevertheless, the data simply do not currently support that the number of hours adolescents spend using digital media is associated with increased risks for psychopathology or maladaptive behavior. I think one of the worst things we can do for our children is ban them from cell phones, from social media and such. I think that we can guide and help them, maybe put limits on the amount that they use. But I think the worst thing you can do is ban them completely. I was banned from video games when I was a kid. I think that's a terrible way to do things. The interesting thing about me being banned from video games when I was a kid is I still played them. I played them a lot in my friend's house. I just spent less time at home. I also now am a huge gamer. I married my wife, who's a gamer. She plays almost on a daily basis. I don't play on a daily basis, but pretty close. I think it's more healthy and important to teach our children and ourselves how to cope and not how to run. So, yeah, the effects of digital media are not as cut and dried as the media likes to hype. The truth is we just don't know what the effects of many of these things are yet. And we probably won't for decades or even centuries. Going on with the church and technology, back when I lived in Taiwan, I have a picture here of the Book of Mormon in Chinese, what we used to call the Quad, which was the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price in English. So this big old thick book. I think I had the smaller hand-sized one, but still. Then I had the Bible in Chinese, and of course whatever manuals. So I had to lug that. I remember lugging all that crap around every Sunday. And then I was one of the early adopters of this little device, which I'm showing on the screen, is a Cassiopeia PDA Pocket PC. You might remember the, what was the other one? The Palm Pilot. Palm Pilot was really popular back then. It was a similar technology. And I was even one of the early adopters of the first generation GPS devices using my Pocket PC. It was really funny. You hooked a cord up to it and then put a little black box on the top of your car, and most of the time it would work. It was amazing. The scriptures of that time during the PDA era were put out by members, not by the church. The church is still not caught up to that technology yet. But the amazing thing was I went from all these books, 1, 2, 3, 4 at least, to a single book where I had all my scriptures and everything. And that's the way we are now with our cell phones. So technology in the church has always been important. It's always been important to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Brigham Young in 1862 said, "Every discovery in science and art that is really true and useful to mankind has been given by direct revelation from God." Let me read that again. Every discovery has been given by direct revelation from God that is really true and useful to mankind. Though but few acknowledge it, it has been given with a view to prepare the way for the ultimate triumph of truth and the redemption of the earth from the power of sin and Satan. That's a very Brigham Young statement in his style. President Spencer W. Kimball, I don't know the year he said this, but he lived from 1895 to 1985. He said, quote, "I believe that the Lord is anxious to put into our hands inventions of which we laymen have hardly had a glimpse." Cell phones didn't exist in 1985 when he died. I think it's very prophetic where he says, to put into our hands. All right. This is what Elder Nelson said in 2014. Sherry Dew was quoted him when she spoke about, or she gave a talk to BYU called "Prophets See Around Corners," talking about how prophetic the vision of President, or at the time Elder Nelson was, and then later became President Nelson during the pandemic. Sherry Dew was I think she was the CEO of Deseret Book. Yeah, right there. She's the CEO of Deseret Book, which is a book company that it's not owned by, I think it might be owned by the church. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it's definitely affiliated with the church. In her talk, she said, the President Nelson, who was over the missionaries at the time, said, quote, "We need to put these," meaning cell phones and iPads, "into the hands of every missionary." He said that in 2014. And then Sherry Dew says, now fast forward to the January of 2020. That month, President Russell M. Nelson, now president of the church, authorized every missionary worldwide to have a smartphone. Then just weeks later, the pandemic shut down the world and proselyting as we knew it stopped. And I believe that is very prophetic. Speaking of the pandemic, Elder Uchtdorf, at a worldwide missionary devotional in 2020, he taught, quote, "When public restrictions are lifted again, be wise to resist the temptation of going back to the old ways." Oh man, don't get me started on that topic, especially when it comes to work and remote. Ugh. Let me read it again. When public restrictions are lifted again, be wise to resist the temptation of going back to the old ways. You need to go back to the future. And I promise you a very bright future with new and exciting opportunities. This work will move forward and upward. He also said, instead of being the last resort, technology needs to be considered up front as an option for us to become more efficient and effective. This is Elder Bednar in 2011. It is no coincidence that Family Search and other tools have come forth at a time when young people are so familiar with a wide range of information and communication technologies. Your fingers have been trained to text and tweet to accelerate and advance the work of the Lord. Let me read that again. Your fingers have been trained to text and tweet to accelerate and advance the work of the Lord, not just to communicate quickly with your friends. The skills and aptitude evident among many young people today are a preparation to contribute to the work of salvation. So, God doesn't hate cell phones. As a matter of fact, He likes them. So that is today's episode. For next week, someone commented at DOOD dude, I guess, from Melly 5323. They asked, I don't practice religion, or they said, I should say, I don't practice religion, I practice faith. Too many people think religion is the same. So I'm going to talk about that in next episode, episode 6, about organized religion, good or bad. So thanks for joining this week. Please ask any questions, like, subscribe, and I appreciate your support.